Hello, everyone, and welcome to Harv's World for the next episode of the Baltic Sea. That's right, we're back in Scandinavia, home of the Vikings, that we have learned a little bit of something about. We're going to learn more about them. We're actually going to look into, well, I'll tell you a little bit later. Right now, I've got all the oats that I harvested off of field 14 right here. There is a fantastic price at the ranch right now. That's what they call it. It doesn't look much like a ranch, but they are offering a very, very good price for oats in this economy, so I'm running these over. Luckily, it's not far away. I collected all the straw off of that field as well. I already sold that off because I've told you I'm not using it for the pigs. I want them to produce slurry, not manure. So no straw for the pigs. I sold that off. It was over 300. It was about 308,000 liters. That came right over here to. This is the ranch side, and then the left side there is known as the barn. Like I said, it doesn't look like a ranch much, but that's what they call it. So that's what we're going with. The straw brought in about 13,000 euros, just over 13,000 euros. Let's see what our oats are going to bring us today. There we go, not quite 35,000, 34,624. So we are doing well for the last day or two between the straw and the oats. 47,000, basically 48,000 euros. So we're up. And well, we're $1 million or €1 million in debt at this point. So yeah, we kind of need the money. I broke one of my cardinal rules: never take a loan. But it happens. Now our potato field on the left, that is ready to harvest. That needs to get taken care of as soon as possible. And I really need to get some pig feed crop in the ground too, because the pigs are reproducing in a dynamic fashion. We're almost up to 150. And I'm going to keep letting them build. The more pigs we have, the faster they'll reproduce. That's impotent because the faster they reproduce, obviously, the more money they make us, because I think the math is pretty obvious there. This is our triticale field, and I've already started working on this morning. Like I said, I got a nice early start, and started harvesting the triticale, but I knew I needed to get those oats over as soon as possible in order to get, or make sure I got a good price on them. So now the question is, what can I do to take care of this loan? I need to keep these crops rotating. I need to get field 14 planted. I'm going to need to collect all the straw off of this field, and it looks like the triticale is producing a lot of straw. One of the nice things about this triticale, I mean, obviously it's producing a buttload of straw, but it's actually producing quite a high volume of crop as well. I've already unloaded once. Well, I unloaded several times before I sold oats this morning, but just in this small patch here, I've already unloaded once, and I've got almost a full combine again. So it's a good, nice, high volume crop. Now, it doesn't sell for much. It's a lot like wheat or barley. It's a very similar type of grain. And I don't know if you know about farm sim pricing, but or maybe it's even real world farm pricing. But the more something produces, the less, the lower the price, generally speaking. It kind of balances out. There are still higher dollar crops that you can plant to make more money, which we're going to do, but we also have to do some crop to keep our pigs fed. Anyway, I do want to get this potatoes out of the ground today. I am going to get field 14 planted. I'm going to be keeping an eye on our new field. Let's take a look at that real quick. So our new field is field 22 right here. I did buy that, and that was 415,000 euros. Just over 6 hectares. So we are in good shape over there. Oh, what I wanted to check was to see where it stood as far as growth. So it's getting late stage growth. I think I might have a plan for that. I'm not worried about it today though. At least it's all taken care of and ready to go. But I do want to get field 14, and it looks like this field needs completely limed now. So not as worried about field 13. It's going to take some additional work. Plus I need to get all the straw off. As far as the potatoes go though, I've got an idea. And my idea is either going to work or it won't, and if it doesn't, it's going to cost me extra money. If it does, it's going to save me a significant amount of cash. We're going to find out which it is here in just a minute. But first, I want to gather up all my triticale. Some's in the silo already, and see what we need to do to sell that off, or if I can sell it yet. It looks like I'm headed back over to the ranch. Our field produced just over 54,000 liters. I can only haul 52 in this trailer. The ranch is paying a little over 400 per 1,000. That's a very good price under hard economy. So I'm going to go ahead and sell this off as well. Bring in a little bit more cash. And then I'm going to see about getting field 14 planted. What am I going to plant in field 14? It's got to be a good cash crop. I'm thinking I either go back to soybeans or canola. I'll figure it out. Come on. Alright, what do we get? It's almost like watching a game show waiting for the final tally. I'm sure you know what I mean. Hey, we're over 200. Another 22,000 today just for our triticale, so that's not bad. I mean, we're not going to pay off the $1 million anytime soon at that rate, but still, that's 70,000 on 2 fields. That's significant. Still have the potatoes to harvest. Anyway, let me get into field 14. So I told you I've done some upgrading, and this is one of those, or this is the upgrade so far. There's going to be some more. There will be some more. Yes, I know we need to pay off that cash, but I'm more concerned about making this a well-oiled machine first. So I traded in our seeder and bought this beast of a thing. We really did very much need something more to plant with, and this is going to get the job done much faster. In my opinion, that's extremely important. Come on, let's get that filled up with seed. And I think we are going to go with soybeans. As much as I feel like those oats did us very well. I think soybeans are going to be the ticket this time around. But this is a Kverneland cedar. Of course, we know at this point Kverneland is a very good Scandinavian brand. And our field 13 here, or field 14, I'm sorry, is prepped and ready. Oh man, that does nice. Look at that. How quick that just unfolds, opens up, and says, "All right, boss, let's go to work." Or something. All right, let's see what we got here. Come on, brother. Let's get some soybeans on this field. Oh, yeah, very nice. Very nice indeed. It's 12 meters wide. I will take it. I want to swing a little extra wide here and make sure. There we go. I got it. There we go. So, Vikings. What do we know about Vikings? Well, I've been thinking about this. And where does our information from Vikings come from? Now, there are two places that do not get included in the definition of Scandinavia, but there could be a very serious argument made that they should be. And the reason that they should be is that they were both discovered and settled by the Vikings. Those two places are Iceland and Greenland. Now, Iceland in particular is significant because that's where a lot of the literature and documentation that we have about Vikings comes from. A lot of that was written down and stored in Iceland. In fact, this was a really cool little factoid that I discovered recently. The Icelandic language is actually still very, very close to original Old Norse language. In fact, think of it this way. So, if you try to go back and read Shakespeare or Old English text, and it's got funny syllables, it's got funny writing, it's, not what we're used to today, not modern, old archaic words that are hard to pronounce and we don't know what they mean. It's the same thing with Old Norse. However, the Icelandic language is still so in line with Old Norse writing that a lot of Icelanders can just go right in and read the Old Norse documents without any struggle whatsoever. It's that close. And I thought that was really, in particularly, a cool little factoid. Anyway, getting back to that. So there are a great many sagas and poems, documents left over in Iceland from the Viking Age. A lot of the stories that the Vikings enjoyed, but a lot of their history is written down in these documents as well. Now, something that I find really interesting, Scandinavia, we know at this point, is made up of Denmark, Norway, and Sweden. However, it's not unreasonable to think that Iceland and Greenland should be part of Scandinavia because they were both settled originally by the Vikings as well. And that's what leads us to find all of this recorded history in Iceland because so many Vikings traveled there. Now, one of the things that interestingly happened during this transition, we're talking about a few hundred years here, mind you, is that a lot of the places, Denmark, Norway, Sweden, Ireland, England, places where the Vikings had settled, and we didn't really talk about Ireland, but did you know that Dublin, I believe it's Dublin, was actually founded by Vikings? But anyway, a lot of the Vikings that lived in those countries took part in Christianity. They converted to Christianity, and they really started to separate themselves from their pagan history, from the old gods, Odin, Thor, Loki, and all of those folks. However, in Iceland, while Christianity was becoming a thing, they embraced both. And they didn't separate themselves from their historical associations with that was a bit of a rough turnaround, wasn't it? They didn't separate themselves from their Viking history and their Viking beliefs. So a lot of the Viking legend and lore stayed active in Iceland. Now, the Icelanders during this transition, and there was political upheaval and all sorts of drama that took place in Iceland, but it did push them toward writing down all of this Viking history, and they did it in a couple of ways. It's really kind of interesting. If it hadn't been for the Icelanders, we would have lost all of this Viking legend, lore, and history. They had two forms that these writings took. First were the Eddas, which are basically poetry and myths, Old Norse gods, goddesses, and heroes. Now, keep in mind that originally all of this was just passed on from one person to another. A storyteller, and in fact, poets in the Viking world were actually very respected and were often very wealthy. If you were a good storyteller and a good poet, the Vikings thought you were something else. So the Eddas, these are the myths, the stories that people like to tell around the campfire that don't have necessarily any truth, but are still fascinating and enjoyable. The Vikings loved these things. Now the other form are the sagas. And the sagas are truly a literary achievement. Kind of the early form of a modern novel. Think of your favorite novel, and you'll have an idea of what the sagas were about. But many of the sagas were written down as truths, family histories, things that genuinely did happen. So that's the difference between the Eddas and the sagas in Viking lore, and we have Iceland to thank for saving that. So you'll recall we already touched on one of these Eddas. It's the Rigsthula, the story of Heimdall, as you'll recall. That's the story of Heimdall traveling through the earth, interacting with humans, and it's actually so incredibly famous now that it's considered a fairly profound social commentary. There are many others. Some of the more famous ones, one of them is, and you'll recognize some of this if you've watched the Marvel movies, Voluspa and Skama. And these poems actually go into detail about like the final battle between Thor and the serpent Jormundander. There was a battle between Odin and the Norse wolf Fenrir that this poem describes. The final battle between Loki and Heimdall. We know Heimdall also was the guardian of the Bifrost and the Rainbow Bridge. So, these types of stories, these are the kind of stories that the Vikings would have told each other for the thrill, the enjoyment of storytelling, and thinking about their gods and how powerful their gods really were. Now, there are three Eddas that speak specifically of Odin and focus on Odin. The first two, the Grimnismal, and I'm going to butcher the second one, Vafthrasnismal. The Grimnismal and the Vafthrasnismal. That's a mouthful, let me tell you. These two specifically speak to Odin traveling the world in disguise, meeting people, and gradually revealing who he is to them, often not to their benefit, let me tell you. And then there's the Havamal. This one's particularly interesting because this is almost like a Norse Bible. They say it was written by Odin. If you know anything about the Bible, that's the Word of God. Well, the Havamal is the word of Odin. And these words are ascribed to Odin. In fact, the entire book is kind of like a Viking book of Proverbs. It's been described, and it really offers a lot of insight and an interesting view of how the Vikings behaved, how they handled themselves, the wisdom in dealing with one another, things of that nature. The ethics of the Vikings. And that's pretty darn interesting. We already talked about the Rigsthula. And then the other famous Edda is the Lokasenna. I'm sure you can kind of figure out where this one, or who this one is ascribed to. The Locusena is a poem about Loki, obviously. And apparently, Loki, who of course is always out trying to find new and interesting ways to get into trouble, well, apparently the gods got together. They decided to tie one on, have a few horns of ale, and Loki crashed their party, and got a little bit tipsy himself and started pretty much telling each god exactly what their deepest, darkest secrets were and revealing them to everyone else at the party. This sounds like the Loki that we all know and love. I'm sure he would get into that kind of trouble. I had one little bit of a row over here that I missed, but man, this cedar is spectacular. It's going to make life much, much, much easier. There was nothing wrong with the Vader stat. It was a good piece of equipment. I'm not going to knock it or anything, but I said fold. Thank you. There it goes. This is just so much more bang for your buck. It makes it much, much faster, obviously. And see why I keep talking about how aggressive the weeds are here in Scandinavia? Because, man, I barely have this field planted and the weeds are already starting to crop up. No pun intended. Now it's time for a trip to the shop, because I have a plan. Imagine that. Harv has a plan. I do have a plan. I try to always have a plan. I am going to drop this back up where I got it from. Okay, so I brought Nico's forage wagon down here because I'm going to sell it. Probably needs some repair though. Yeah, it does. It's going to give us 85,000 euros. But I have a better alternative that I have looked at in the past. And let's take a look. Because I really do have a plan. Now, in miscellaneous, we have the milling machine, which I have used before and I want to use again. We're going to make sure it's Nico's colors, like so. That's a beautiful, beautiful bit of kit. Now that's only 6,100. This is going to do for us the same thing that $85,000 forage wagon did. So we're going to buy that up. 6,000 versus 85,000. Yeah, we'll take that all day long and twice on Sunday. Now, when it comes to potato technology, we have quite a few options. Now, what I've been using in the past is one of these two. This one, the Ropa, 160 grand. I don't want to spend 160 grand. In fact, just to lease this thing is 8,000. I want an alternative option, and so I'm going to try something here. I don't know if it's going to work, but I'm going to try it. They have these machines, and let me make sure I know what I'm talking about. That's a collector. Extracts potatoes from ground. Need a halum topper before you can use the machine. So this thing, $600 to lease. That's dirt cheap. But it will dig the potatoes out of the ground. Now it's only 1.5 meters wide. I wish it had a rear swath dropping, but I guess we'll go with left. Yeah, left works for me. We can change it if at some point it doesn't work. I'm not going to buy this yet. I'm going to lease it first because I want to test it. So yes, I'm going to get that bad boy. And it's specifically telling me I need a halum topper to be able to use this. Basically, a halum topper is just a mower. Cuts the greens. That's another 500. So 8,000 as opposed to 1,100. I'm gonna try this. Now, what I'm hoping for, well, show, don't tell. That's always the best option. Show, don't tell. So I'll show you what I'm going to try to do. Okay, here we go. Now the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to drop off the digger. And I'm just going to focus on getting the tops cut. I don't want to do both at the same time. Reason being, the topper, the halum topper, just a fancy way of saying mower, literally, is wider than the potato digger. So they aren't going to work and play well together as far as width goes. So I'm just going to mow the tops off first. Plus, I don't want this big of a tractor on the digger. And in fact, I was thinking of a different plan. That's why I parked the Fendt with the trailer there. I expected to offload there, but that's not going to happen. So I need to go get the smaller Voltra when it comes time to digging these out. But for now, this will do. Alright, just one little tiny bit of halum. Halum be gone. Okay, that takes care of that. All of the green is off the potatoes. Now I'm going to go grab the small Voltra. We're going to see if we can't just tip these potatoes right out onto the ground instead of having to constantly be offloading into a trailer. Because those potato harvesters are awfully small. Okay, it's kind of hard to see, but if you look right there, because it's tipping them off the edge of the field into the weed patch, which is fine. It's not going to stop us from being able to pick them up. But it is doing what we need it to do. And I wouldn't even try using this without some kind of GPS to work with. I'll tell you right here and now. Let's get back into our Vikings a little bit more. Obviously, this potato harvest is not going to happen anytime quickly, so we've got time to look into our Viking history a bit more. So we talked about the Eddas. Let's talk a little bit about the sagas, shall we? The sagas are very much the precursor to the modern novel. Now, you know, when you think of books you might have liked to read, they are broken down into genres, and the sagas are the same way. Think about it, you know, if you're reading a book, you could read mystery, suspense, science fiction, fantasy, murder, all that type of stuff. Excuse me. And the modern, or the Viking sagas aren't any different. There were three in particular that were of interest. One of them is the historic and legendary sagas. Then there's the historic king sagas, and then there's the family sagas. Those three are the ones that really are the most popular. We're gonna talk about a few of those here in just a minute. But as you can imagine, the historic, or the heroic, I should say, legendary sagas, you know, that's our high fantasy, dragons and killings and all kinds of nastiness and unbelievable things taking place. Then we've got the historic king sagas, and these are particularly interesting because the king sagas really start to tell us about genuine historical events that shaped the Viking world, and the kings that brought about these transformations. And then the family sagas tell the stories of real Vikings. They go into the depth of and complexity of Viking life, and you can really start to see how intelligent and strong these Vikings were. You really get a feel for how rich and fulfilled their lives were, and what type of quality of life they were having. And of course, just like the Eddas, there are many, many popular ones. The family sagas alone, there's over 40 of them. One of the most favorite sagas of the Vikings, ones that they really particularly enjoyed, is called the Volsungs saga. Now this one is sort of like the Viking version of Lord of the Rings. It's got all kinds of stuff in it: dragons, shapeshifters, prophecies, superheroes, intrigue, fate, Valkyries, sex and violence. It's got all the bells and whistles, and the Vikings absolutely loved this one. Now remember, these were stories that were originally told word of mouth, and luckily the Icelanders took the time to write these down for us. This one was very popular, and it actually has several versions. Some that were a little more, let's see, I don't want to say polished, more along the lines of cleaned up, made a little more family friendly, I guess. Once the Vikings started heading into Christianity, they had to put aside some of the more risque portions of these stories. But that's the Volsung saga, and it's really, really interesting. Now, there's another one called the Saga of Hrolf Kraki. Hrolf Kraki, he was a Scandinavian warlord, and he's kind of like a Scandinavian version of King Arthur. He brings a lot of extraordinary heroes together, and he sets out to right wrongs and find some glory for himself and his warriors. Archaeologists have recently uncovered places in Denmark that help support some of the story of Hrolf Kraki. That's pretty darn interesting. So, these stories aren't 100% accurate. Think of your favorite war movie and then try to tell world history or the history of that war through the lens of that movie. It's not going to be 100% accurate. Same with these. There's hints of historic truth with a lot of embellishment. They were doing this long before we even knew what a movie was going to be, but they did it well, apparently. Now, one that people might be very, very familiar with, and this is actually one of the Icelandic Viking sagas, and the reason people might be familiar with this is because of the show Vikings. And this is the saga of Ragnar Lothbrok and his son. Now, there is a bit of truth with this. Ragnar is one of the most famous Vikings of all time. And I believe his last name, Lothbrok, actually means something kind of silly, like shaggy britches or something like that. So he doesn't sound very heroic when you think, hey, this guy's named after some shaggy pants. But it is what it. But there is some truth in there, and we have talked about a couple of the guys from this saga. Ivar the Boneless, he was one of Ragnar's sons. He was the guy who, if you remember, he was it Troy or Kent? It wasn't Troy. He sacked York, and the tale of Ragnar is set just before the founding of Iceland, and it actually does include many, many verifiable historic details. So that's pretty darn interesting. The next one that's very, very famous is called Egil Saga, and it's one of the family sagas. It's very popular, and it actually is set in Norway, Iceland, and England. It runs pretty much during the Viking Age, about 850 to 1000, and it's just the story of a clan, the Skallagrim clan. Egil is Skallagrim's son. Egil, Egil. He's a typical Viking. He's a bit of a farmer, a raider, a businessman, you know, father, the whole nine yards, and he's traveling out in the Atlantic Ocean in search of adventure, and he's apparently being pursued by Eric Bloodaxe, who is a real life Viking, by the way, um, and actually did become the King of York at one point, Eric Bloodaxe. But that's another one. Eagle Saga is another one of the sagas that's very, very popular. Now, another one of these sagas is called the Laxdale Saga, and interestingly enough, this would kind of be your Viking version of a romance novel. It's the story of a bunch of families that all get together and they say, hey, we're going to Iceland. Let's travel to Iceland, make a new life for ourselves. And there's a nasty little love triangle that forms between Gudrun and a couple of her friends. And there's, politics and honor and sentiment, loss, regret. Pretty much exactly what you would expect. In fact, some people believe that this particular saga was written by a woman because it has a unique perspective that isn't often seen in Viking stories. So it's very possible that this is the precursor to the modern. Another saga, the saga of Gisli Surson. Gisli Surson. Pretty straightforward, simple saga, but very popular. Again, Gisli finds himself in a situation where he's got two brother-in-laws. One of them has dishonored the other, and Gisli has to kill one of them in order to protect the honor of the other. He does so, of course, because he's a Viking. Why wouldn't he kill when he wanted to? But unfortunately, that makes him an outlaw, and he has to run. And that's the nature of the story: is him running, trying to avoid the pursuit of people trying to catch up with him and cleave his head in. And finally, let's talk about the Vinland sagas. This is particularly interesting because this kind of disproves some history that we were taught as kids. Now, the Vinland sagas come in two forms: the saga of Eric the Red and the Greenlander saga. Both of them tell the story of the founding of Greenland, which happened just before the turn of the century, about 985, and then the exploration that the Vikings did to the American continent, North America. They beat Columbus by 500 years. Remember, these two sagas, they're similar stories. They disagree sometimes, so they're not 100% accurate. Like we said, these sagas tend to have embellishment or truth hidden in embellishments, but it's still very, very interesting. But these sagas both speak to Vinland, the lands far to the west, and they talk about the indigenous peoples there, and so long before Columbus, and discoveries have now been made that pretty much prove that the Vikings did in fact make it to North America. Off the coast of Canada, Newfoundland is where a lot of these discoveries have been made, and we suspect at this point that Vikings were the first settlers to come across the oceans and at least try to colonize North America. Well, I'm not going to say it was an easy process. Well, it's an easy process, don't get me wrong. It does take time. Is there any way to get around a potato harvest taking time? I don't really see it happening. However, we are done. That's it. That's all. Potatoes are out of the ground. They're on the ground. Tons and tons of potatoes laying here on the ground as I drive over them. Now it's just a matter of getting them off the ground. Now I've got a few options here, but I think this is going to require a trip to the shop. So let me run over there, get this equipment returned, and I left a piece of equipment over there that hopefully is going to help me with this process. Be right back. Okay, all I've got to say at this point is this has got to work. I really need this to work. And lo and behold, it looks like it's going to work. Look at that. Look at that. It's picking up my potatoes. Oh, come on. Move along. Move along, Skippy. Oh, and it's going to do it in timely fashion, too. We are not wasting time getting these potatoes off the ground. This is going to be so much easier than all of that. Dragging that big, heavy, long harvester around and having to constantly stop and unload it and try to find space for it because this is a tight, narrow field anyway. This is the way you do potatoes. Now, I'm not going to say the harvesting process was the quickest thing I ever did, but this right here is the payoff. I think I could actually speed this up a little bit more even. Let's run up to 20 and see where we're at. Talk about money-saving alternatives. That right there saved me a ton of bucks. Abso-floggin-lutely. And this is going to be one heck of a harvest, too. Now, I need to remember, I need to put about 5,000 liters in the silo to save for the next planting, because I can use these potatoes instead of seed. And that makes Harv a happy man because seed costs money. Potatoes, I just made a whole metric ton of them. Literally a metric ton of them, I think. I'm missing a little bit here and there, but that's okay. We're almost full. Look at that. Look at that. I think it thinks we are full. It's kind of stopped picking up. Okay. If that's the case, let's make sure. Yep, that'll do. Okay. Go drop these off. I'm going to drop 5,000 in the silo. I'm going to go feed the pigs with some of them. And the rest are going to the washing equipment. Okay. That worked like a charm. Got just a few little niblets to pick up. There's one little tiny little bit right back over here. This is my third trailer. So the first trailer, like I said, I put some in the silo for seed so that we can plant this field again in potatoes. Because man, the pigs take a lot of potatoes. So the first trailer was 52,000 liters, basically, give or take. About 5,000 or 6,000 liters in the silo for seed. The rest of it went to the pigs. And they're still not full. And the pigs are procreating like there's no tomorrow. They really are. We're going to take a look at them in just a second. As soon as I get these potatoes to their final destination, I'll show you where the second trailer load of potatoes ended up. Right here where they were before. That's 52,000 liters on the ground right there. I'm going to add another 18 to it. So basically 70,000 liters that need to be processed, washed, cleaned, whatever you want to call it. Yeah, washed and sorted. That's where we're at. That's what we're after. And while these are tipping, I need to be careful. I'm going to get stuck here because these like to get under my wheels. There we go. That's a nice pile of potatoes right there. Pigs. 171. Remember, not that long ago I sold them down to 100? Yeah, they're popping like flies. We get a new pig every hour. 24 pigs a day. That's good profit, and it's going to get better. Outstanding. Absolutely outstanding. And you can see I need to get, well, I got soybeans in now, so I might use those. I don't think I have anything else in the silo. Wheat and barley and corn. I've got corn coming up, so that's going to be a big help. Anyway, pigs are in good shape, and we're going to make a lot of money off of them. $1 million is not going to stop the Harv. However, we are coming to the end of the day here in Scandinavia, and I think that's going to do it for this episode of the Baltic Sea. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please remember to hit the like and subscribe buttons down below. As always, I very much appreciate you coming along for the ride. And until next time, take care.